Hello, I'm James Caldwell. Welcome to the Classical Guitar Practice Room. Today we're going to look at Segovia's Diatonic major and minor scales found in this little folio that he published many decades ago. This is an essential little booklet that every classical guitarist should have and should be playing from daily. If you don't have a copy, there's a link below in the description that'll take you over to Amazon where you can purchase one. So in this video, I want to begin with a brief overview of what Segovia's diatonic major and minor scales are, why we practice them, and how to practice them. So to begin, what they are is a collection of 24 scales, 12 major and 12 minor, covering every key. The book is arranged by having the scales paired with a major scale and its relative minor, such as the first two C major and A minor, and they are relative because they share the same key signature, which in that case has no sharps or flats. And he continues adding sharps, giving us a new major and minor scale until he gets to 6 sharps. After that he switches to 5 flats, and he subtracts flats until he gets to the last pair of scales, which has 1 flat in the key signature, which is F major and D minor. The thought of learning 24 different scales and committing them to memory and practicing them regularly sounds quite tedious, but it's really not quite that bad. We can categorize these scales. First, there's major and minor. There's 12 of each. And within the major and minor scales, we can further classify them the way Segovia has written them out. He has 3-octave scales that begin on the 6th string, and he has 2-octave scales that begin on the 5th string. And he repeats those patterns quite a bit. So there's 4 common forms: a 3-octave major scale, a 2-octave major scale, a 3-octave minor scale, a 2-octave minor scale. There is a third form of the minor scale, which is a 3-octave scale that begins on the 5th string. And it's a pattern that he uses twice. So really there's 5 main patterns to learn, which will cover 21 of the 24 scales. That leaves 3 scales remaining, and each of these are unique. They're not repeated anywhere in this collection. So really there's 8 different patterns to cover 24 scales. So that covers what the scales are. Now the question, why do we practice them? Well, every musician knows that they should practice scales regularly to increase their speed and their agility on their instrument. And in the introduction to this booklet, Segovia says, "Thanks to the independence and elasticity with which the fingers develop through the study of scales, the student will soon acquire a quality which is very difficult to gain later: physical beauty of sound. I say physical because sonority and its infinite shadings are not the result of stubborn willpower, but spring from the innate excellence of the spirit." So think about that. So scale practice, you might think, is an exercise for the left hand, running up and down the fretboard. And it is, but once you become comfortable with each of the patterns, it really becomes a right hand exercise. At least I view it this way, and I think many classical guitarists use these scales as a vehicle for developing right-hand alternation between all combinations of fingers. In fact, underneath the first scale, there's a little box of fingerings that Segovia suggests: IM, IM, MI, MI, AM, AM, MA, MA, IA, IA, and AI, AI. There's a 7th one, which is IM, AM, IMA. We will talk about that in a later video, because that's not just pure alternation between 2 fingers. Now let's look at the first scale. And it's the C major scale. And if you're not very good at reading standard notation, he does have a lot of clues in here as to where and how these should be played with the left hand. Underneath the notes, there's a number in parentheses with a little line and a bracket. And the first scale begins with a 5, and a bracket extending past 2 notes. That's telling us that these 2 notes will be played on the 5th string. Following that, there's a 4 in parentheses with a bracket that extends past 3 strings, and that's telling us that those 3 notes will be played on the 4th string, and so on. So he does tell us which strings to play the notes on. Above each of the notes are the fingers to use on the left hand. So the first 2 notes we said were going to be played on the 5th string, and we're going to use finger 2 for the first one and finger 4 for the second one. Now that's a C and a D. What you can do is right here establish what position we're in, and you can just write above the first note a Roman numeral 2. We are in 2nd position. That means the index finger is lined up over the 2nd fret. If we place our hand in the 2nd position and begin by placing finger 2 on the 5th string, that will be the C that begins it. And so on the 5th string we have fingers 2 and 4 for the first 2 notes. Then over to the 4th string we have fingers 1, 2, and 4. Over to the 3rd string we have finger 1 and 3. Now we're still on the 3rd string, and there's 2 more notes that say 1, 3. Well, it's not going to be these 2. We're going to have to shift up. We're going to shift to the 5th position. So right above the 3rd note on the 3rd string, which has a 1 above it, we need to write a Roman numeral 5. We are now in 5th position. And so in 5th position, with finger 1 over the 5th fret, we press the 3rd string, and finger 3 is on the 3rd string. Over to the 2nd string, finger 1, finger 2, finger 4, and over to the 1st string, finger 1, finger 3, finger 4. And he descends the same way. 1st string, finger 3, finger 1. Over to the 2nd string, finger 4, finger 2, finger 1. 3rd string, finger 3, finger 1. We stayed in 5th position up to this point. Now we have a 3-1 again on the 3rd string, and we're going to have to shift back to the 2nd position. Write a Roman numeral 2 above it. We're shifting back to 2nd position. And then we have finger 3, finger 1, over to the 4th string, finger 4, finger 2, finger 1, over to the 5th string, finger 4, finger 2. As you begin to learn each new scale, you can map them out this way. Identify where the shifts are. There are shifts in every scale. In this first one, this 2-octave C major scale, there's just one shift. It's really the simplest scale in the book. You'll then realize that the lower part of the scale is played in 2nd position, and the higher part is played in the 5th position. Shift back to the 2nd position. Becoming comfortable with that shift. Going up, 1, 3, shift, 1, 3, and descending, 3, 1, shift, 3, 1. Practicing just those shifts will help you play the scale up and down very fluidly. There's another note that says practice each scale apoyando, which means with a rest stroke. With the plucking hand. Resting on the lower string as you strike each note. However, I prefer to practice these free stroke. Really, you should practice them both ways. It will allow you to build up speed more quickly, and it's just a good idea. I'm not sure why he says to do it rest stroke only. So that is the C major scale. It's a 2-octave major scale that begins on the 5th string. And as you work through this book, you will find that when you get to D major, it's the same pattern. However, you're now starting in 4th position with your 2nd finger on the 5th fret for D. And later in the book, you'll see that there is a D flat, which is just 1 fret down from there, 3rd position. Same pattern. And also for E flat major, which is up in the 5th position, starting on the 6th fret. So when you get to those keys, you'll look at the scale and look at the sharps and flats, and you might be scratching your head, but you'll quickly realize that it's just the same pattern that you learned from the C major scale. So practice your scales on a regular basis. And remember, the first step is getting it in the left hand knowing where the fingers go and getting it in muscle memory here. Once you're comfortable with a new pattern, then focus on alternation, strict alternation. I am, up and down without exception. Never repeat a finger. When you're comfortable with I am, try IA. When you're comfortable with IA, then reverse them. Try MI and AI. And any combination of fingers is good. But always begin with I am. And once you've got that down and it's really solid, challenge yourself with the next pair. Well, thanks for joining me today in the Classical Guitar Practice Room. And stay tuned as we continue Segovia's Diatonic major and minor scales. I've been James Caldwell, and thanks for watching.